we doing the written questions today, guys? Okay. We'll pass around some written questions. And this is our second town hall today, so we've been kind of making the rounds and started in Portville, and now we're here today. And I'm sure we got a smaller group today, so we'll open it up to questions and dialogue. But we also do the written questions just to kind of keep track and hopefully cover as many topics. Some people travel quite a distance, and we want to make sure that we cover all the issues. Because when we first started doing these, we did do the written questions, and then before we knew it, we'd spend an hour, and we only covered one or two topics, and then people were like, well, I wanted to ask you about this, and we never got to it. So this way, if we run out of time, we always have a record of getting back to people and making sure we follow up and cover as much as we can. As you probably know, maybe just a quick update from Washington. Just got back a couple weeks ago. We've been working the district. We're on vacation, quote unquote, I guess it is. I don't know if you can call it that, but we've been traveling around the district and the new parts of the district, and just try to introduce ourselves and just be accessible and out there. And got my son with us today. Will's hanging out with us with the Buffalo Bill cap on, and he's spending the day, and he comes with us quite a bit. But what I'm hearing is what I think is the number one issue from people. And what I'm hearing is that people are concerned about the economy, they're concerned about jobs, they're concerned about what are their kids going to do, what's Will going to have before him when he gets to that point. And that's the number one issue, is the jobs situation. 8.3% unemployment nationally, 8.8% here in the southern tier. We need to do better than that. Because jobs, not only just the jobs they represent, but it's a huge part of dealing with the secondary issue that I hear a lot about and that I'm really concerned about. That's the national debt crisis, the debt crisis that's coming down the pipeline. And as many of you have been to our town halls, you know our charts, but that is the path that we are on. We just continue doing the same that we've always done. And we have to change that path. We have to get this under control and in order. And along with, in my opinion, the cause of this is a spending-driven problem, but also it's a stagnant economy. And the more we get people back to work, we team up the growth of the economy with downsizing the government, getting into more of a limited federal government role. That's going to solve a lot of problems, and that's what we're trying to work for. We hand out the forms from our business plan, our mission statement, when it deals with jobs, because I wanted to put in black and white. When we work in the office, we're focusing on these 4 points. We're getting the debt under control, so we get confidence back in the American market. We tackle comprehensive tax reform, because our tax code, 70,000 pages of tax law, is ridiculous for America. Puts us in a non-competitive position, but it also just causes so many different problems when you're picking winners and losers out of Washington, D.C. that code represents. So we got to simplify that. The regulatory relief is what we're committed to also. Heard story after story, and we see it here in the district, of the regulations coming out of Washington that are really on the backs of small business America and really stifling growth. We got to come at this from my perspective, a reasonable perspective, and make sure that any regulations that come out of Washington are reasonable in scope and they're consistent with what we envision as a reasonable oversight to make sure that the benefit of the regulation outweighs its cost. And then the fourth point that we focus on is a comprehensive energy policy and all of the above energy policy, because it not only has economic impacts, because we need power to grow the economy in regards to, we're going to ignite the industrial and manufacturing rebirth here in America, so we start building things here in America again. It's also a national security issue when we talk about energy. So coupling those two together. So that's kind of our vision. That's what we spend a lot of time in, and that was kind of developed from roundtables, discussions, town halls, and putting it forth in the mission statement so we get some sort of directive in the office to our guys to make sure we focus on what I think are the critical issues of the day. And with that, we can open it up to a conversation, because I think that's the best way to do this. Rather than, I could go on and on and on. We can talk about so many different things. But Lee, you got any questions there, or do you want to just show us?
And then just a couple of
America, you come here legally. And so we've been a big firm advocate of controlling our borders, implementing technology to the fullest extent possible. We've been supporters of a program that came to our attention during a kind of a roundtable conversation, the Red Card program. I don't know if you're familiar with that at all. What it is it's essentially it's a work permit for folks who want to come in from other countries and come here. They're registered, they get a card, it's the red card. It's got biometrics, it's got a picture on it, it's got a essentially pre-clearance for security purposes, and essentially you can come. And the beauty of the red card system, that as I get into these issues that I think we need to have a new thought process on, is it decouples path to citizenship from work ability. And that is, I think, a critical distinction, that if we can go down that path, because a lot of folks that we talk to that have come to America who, may have not come here legally, per se, they're essentially smuggled in, and then they're trapped here. But a lot of them want to go back to either Mexico, Canada, or their nation of origin, and they don't have the ability to come and go. And we've tried to essentially trap a lot of people here who don't want to be here any longer. And so we're supporters of those types of proposals. We're a supporter of strong border control and implementation, and continue to be a voice for that. But I don't know if that's answering your question in regards to...
No, I just saw one point of great percent. On the other hand, thousands more people, our own people, citizens, are having to call finding jobs. I'm already had that in the mix.
Yeah, and that's a problem. Yeah, and it's an interesting dynamic. It's an interesting conversation I've had with a lot of people in our area when it comes to like agricultural jobs, because the H-2A, we've been very supportive of H-2A and H-1B programs, and they tell me repeatedly they can't find people to work in those positions, and they need the H-2A program, essentially the red card version of the red card program that's already there, but it's just boggled down in red tape. It's frustrating when you see an 8.3, 8.8% unemployment rate, and you hear that from folks. So I think there's also something going on in the background about where we are as a nation and where we are as a society, and hard work needs to be applauded and respected, and success needs to be applauded and respected, not demonized. Yeah, Doug?
President Obama just pulled the backdoor, they call it press called backdoor immigration. I heard Congress is on recess. I would think that immigration policy is something for congressional oversight.
You would think.
But you're probably aware of it.
Yeah, that's what Steve's referring to. That's it.
Like people would serve in the military and several other things. Half a dozen criteria and opens the floodgates up to me to grant a political time. And I heard that there were supposedly people in the political alliances at various offices to get registered or whatever they had to do.
Yeah.
But I thought, what a sneaky thing just before election time.
Yeah. And that's what we're referring to, is that kind of backdoor executive authorization of amnesty. And then it shouldn't be going that way. Yeah, Joe?
The first thing people got to start to realize is that being deported to Mexico is not a death sentence. Mexico is not a poor country. The Mexican GDP, right, the Mexican GDP is equivalent to Canada's. The CIA World View website lists Canada as 13 and Mexico is 14. And theirs is better than the likes of South Korea, Taiwan and Australia, and nobody considers any of those to be poor countries. The problem is they don't get people out of their money. I don't know how that works out. The personal GDP is way down in Mexico. So it's not a matter of that being a poor country.
An issue.
Yeah.
I just appreciate the fact, having the ability, what's made us strong as a country is our diversity. And so long as you come here legally, all for it. And there are groups out there, and we get chastised sometimes because some people want to put numbers on the number of people that come in, and I just don't feel that way. We should hold ourselves accountable and just make sure we enforce our rules at the border and let people come and do what we do.
And I've worked with a lot more illegal immigrants than most people have ever seen, because I worked construction in Dallas.
There you go.
5 years.
Yeah, and immigration for our purposes here is much different than immigration in like Arizona we go. That's our healthcare system under Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act. And, you know, what they did to pay for it, initially, it was going to be $500 billion worth of cuts to Medicare to pay for it. And now after some provisions were repealed, the 1099 provision, the rescoring of the cost to it, some other changes that occurred to the CBO who scores these things, it's now $719 million that they've taken, Obama has taken out of Medicare to pay for Obamacare. And it's a legitimate point. And that's why I do appreciate the fact that Paul is part of this race now, Paul Ryan, who I serve with on the Ways and Means Committee. I know him personally. We've spent some time together. And I will say that, you know, what he's going to be able to do is hopefully raise the conversation to legitimate issues and focus on the big issues of the day. And I think that's where this is going. And over the last week and a half, I've seen a definite elevation in the level of conversation that they're focusing on in the presidential politics, which I think is good. Because these issues we need to talk about, we need to be open about, we need to be honest about. And when you talk about the different proposals between the two, you know, what Paul will say, and he said it repeatedly, is that he's putting black and white, his ideas. And that's in the roadmap, that's in the Ryan budget, whatever you want to call it. And he's open to any new ideas or any better ideas, but at least he's going to put in black and white a vision or solutions. And that's what we need now more than ever. And what I'm not seeing from the president is any type of leadership in black and white on how to deal with these problems. You know, I will say, just look at the budget that the president put forth. And as the budget's supposed to be, you know, Ryan's budget is what's getting chastised now, but if you look at what President Obama submitted in regards to his budget, it was the only piece of legislation that I could think of in my 18 months in Congress that was unanimously rejected in the House and the Senate. Unanimously rejected. That means not one Democrat, not one Republican, not one independent voted for his budget in the House and the Senate. That just shows me a complete lack of leadership on the issues of the day. And that's one of the fundamental problems we have. So,
further, I believe he hasn't had a budget since he's been in office.
There has not been a budget. He controlled all, they controlled all parts of the Houses, House, Senate, and the presidency in the first 2 years. And there wasn't a budget passed.
Now, can you look into the chart before this? My background is finance and accounting. I'm coming at what I want to show you. 3 or 4 different ways. The longest I was a registered conservative for about 15 years. I was one of the co-founders of the Conservative Party of Livingston County. And I've also followed economics and politics for many years. And for about several months, I've had my
pay the fair share, the top 2%. If you do that, we're only talking $70 billion. And only, I used the term only until I got to Washington. I was like, holy cow. $70 billion of additional revenue and having the top 2%, that's $250,000 and above, as the president wants to do, raises $70 billion a year when you got a $1.3 trillion problem. And so what I think is going to happen is they have taken the Ryan budget and they've done a good job of the initial description of it and labeling it and branding it. But as Paul is going to get out there and the debate will elevate, the truth is going to come out as to what the roots of these problems are and what the solutions are. And that is going to change the dynamic that you're going to see, I think, 60, 90 days out. Because one of the things you got to be careful of is being in DC for 18 months, I've figured out that there's a different language that these guys play and they try to talk about. So you're going to hear, oh, well, the top 2% raised almost $1 trillion. And we got a $1.3 trillion problem. Do you know what they're saying when they say that? That sounds great, right? It sounds great. That's $1 trillion over 10 years and a $1.3 trillion annual problem. So they're doing 10 to 1. And in DC speak, that's acceptable because that's how DC talks. But when you peel back the onion and the truth gets laid out, people are going to say, you got to be kidding me. You think raising and having the top 2% pay their fair share is going to solve this problem? After people know the real numbers and where we're at, that's going to be, I think that's going to be a game changer. Yeah, sure.
Just a little insight. Can we look into ways of creating more GOP, growth product,
You're speaking my language.
Okay. And now, let's go tax somebody else here or there.
Yeah.
Let's create jobs here, right here.
And that was
my first opinion on creating jobs is our Army Corps of Engineers is building all this stuff over there overseas and doing things. Let's bring them back here to the United States. Put them guys to work. Army Corps
build
of
it here.
Engineers. Alfred,
Yeah. The workforce, the workforce,
Bring them home, put them to work right here.
and that's why I'm glad Iraq and Afghanistan were fine. Iraq is done, Afghanistan's winding down. It's time for the guys to come home.
Yeah.
And focus on
They
the
don't want us there teaching their guys how to protect them. Please, for the sakes of the mothers and the fathers, stop the killing and bring them home.
Amen. I totally support that. The one caveat, the only concern I have is when we pull out, we make sure that we leave enough of a relationship when the bad guy erupts again, that we have a platform to strike from.
Hiroshima Ball, Jack Dan.
There we go.
Don't be afraid to do it again.
God bless.
And all of our forefathers before us.
Amen. Amen. So we stand with them, we'll stand when they're deployed and when they're home. And so I wholeheartedly agree with that. But we got to make sure, because some people just want to go back in the cocoon, and we can't do that because the risk is still there. And they're new threats. They're developing every day. So we got to make sure that we have the ability to strike. I don't support nation building, this whole concept of nation building. We got to focus on our nation now. But we got to be strong enough that when the threat is identified, we take it down. And so you were going to have a follow-up question now.
Yeah, so related to that, but I could give kind of a comment towards this, a suggestion on moving general. One of this country's greatest advantages is the ability to supply food. You've got incredible roads all the way down the Genesee River, and the outlook is going to get worse. Get these core engineers, follow along with banking, you can see where farmers could be more productive by having some drainage and straight if we could get the United States away from this Agenda 21 of the United Nations there. I don't know if you're familiar what is being signed away in this country by the name of biodiversity and sustainability. A lot could be done to improve the productivity, generate revenue and food for a food-hungry world.
Appreciate it. We have more written questions?
We have a couple, yeah.
Okay.
Kate asked on the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, is there a chance of repeal? Because she would like to repeal because of excessive regulation and paperwork for small business.
Okay. The answer is so long.
First, thank you for having me, Richard.
Oh, I love being here.
Congrats on second time. You're going to do it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that, Kate. Yeah, the reality is, deal with it straight, is absent something in November, it's all down in November. If we end up where we're at, an Obama administration for 4 more years, that's going to be our health care. And the problem too with the Affordable Care Act and Obamacare is a lot of the provisions don't kick in until after November 2012. And those are the provisions that really fundamentally change healthcare in a way that we're going to reject. I mean, it is big government takeover of healthcare. And so, and there's obviously a reason why they did that. They're not stupid. It was all politics driven. It was all about getting past the election date and then having it implemented. So you got tax increases coming in, and though I disagree with the Supreme Court and where it came down and its ultimate decision, the Chief Justice did one good thing in there. He called out what it is, and he said to the American people, if you read the decision, it is an expansion of government with increased taxes to pay for it. And if that's what we want, then so be it. And he's not going to second guess what the people want to have done. And so ultimately, it's all up to November and where we're at. And so, to me, I can't argue with that. It's up to us. Now, the reality is, though, when we deal with these issues, we cannot have the debate of passing it in the middle of the night at 2 a.m. and having people in leadership like Nancy Pelosi say, we got to pass it to figure out what's in it. You can't govern the country that way. That is wrong. Hopefully we're going to have a change of path here. Moving forward. Yep.
And actually, you're right about the Chief Justice. A lot of people were really mad and told us what it was like in the convention. And he said he's not going to legislate from the bench, which is a wonderful thing in the Chief Justice.
Yeah.
He basically said,
the people
can't go Obama said what he was going to do. And they liked it, and he's doing it, and so that's why we go down on it.
We could get into some constitutional issues. I mean, he did some things with the taxing power, though, the Chief Justice did, that I really don't agree with, and that's why I don't fundamentally agree with the decision, because he has opened up a Pandora's box. And that's what I've told people, if this type of legislation is now authorized by the federal government, and he didn't go down the Commerce Clause, which we thought it was all going to happen, and that's where it was going to be decided upon, but by opening it up on the taxation power, there really is no limit. There really is no limit on the federal government's authority until we get a different Supreme Court decision. Because that precedent is going to open up the door to a floodgate of federal powers that haven't been exercised before. And as I've told people on the other side, I say be careful. Because there's some people like, oh, this is great, we love it. He's not going to be, regardless if he wins the election or not, he's not going to be president in 2016. So the power that's now being established in the executive branch doesn't go away on 2016. It can be utilized for other purposes. And that is a slippery slope that if we go down, it could be a problem for us long term.
It's the same with his executive orders too, right?
Oh, he's expanding the executive branch like you wouldn't believe. And we've had that conversation with numerous people. Because we talk to everybody on both sides of the aisle, and we have a real good conversation. And when the light bulb goes off, they get concerned. And that's where even some of his guys on his side of the aisle will tell him, oh, you need to back off because you're creating a power that you're going to hand over to somebody that we may disagree with down the road.
And how many times has he said, Congress won't act and he has to?
It's a flexing of a muscle that hasn't been flexed before. Well, let's see here.
The last written question we have, feel free to send them in. Joe, you got a question regarding Dresser-Rand. Maybe you want to...
Dresser-Rand just got bought out by GE. And the CEO of GE is Jeffrey Immelt, one of Obama's biggest supporters. And they've advertised themselves as an equal opportunity affirmative action employer. Those two aren't the same program. A lot of people think they are, but they're not. And the Congressional Research Service has put out a publication for the last, I think, 10 years that describes the history of affirmative action. And it's not what people think it is.
Yeah, they're two different programs. Now they're trying to address the racism issue. Both programs are the ultimate goals, but
they're not having a whole lot of luck at it. But how can this company do that in this area and expect what? I mean, is there any sense in me going there and applying for a job?
Yeah, there was. Because I mean, the demographics of the area obviously are going to play into the decision making. So I appreciate the input, and I know the distinction between the two.
Good. A lot of people don't. And I'm having a problem with it. Have had for the last 40 years.
Yeah. Well, I think we need to get to a country, fundamentally, at the end of the day, the color of your skin is irrelevant. And that's where we need to be. That's where we need to be. And we made so many great strides in that front. And I think we're seeing the results of that.
Along that line, people are telling me those signs that it's just in that door. It says America versus Obama.
Oh.
And they're saying those are racist. But they have no explanation as to why.
I don't understand that.
Neither does anybody else. That's
Yeah.
just where I'm sitting.
Because we don't stand for any racism at all. I mean, it's
No.
just, in this day and age, there's no room for it.
The oil pipeline from out of Canada that is in limbo, what a terrible thing that is. Here we are, oil depleted. We've got a very friendly neighbor to the north where our balance of trade payments is
we have to make decisions and start moving forward. And I think, we've been studying New York now for 3.5 years, going on 4 years. At some point in time, you got to make a decision and you got to move forward. And I think the data is out there, and we have looked at this from all sorts of different issues. And there's going to be a change. There's going to be impacts, and we recognize that. And I don't, I hope there's been a lot of conversation about the issues of fracking with natural gas. There needs to be, I think, more conversation on the issues on housing, traffic, and things like that. But at least when you read the DEC draft generic environmental impact statement, they do touch upon those issues. And Joel Martin is doing a great job, in my opinion, of going through each and every one of those issues and really highlighting and trying to come up with plans to mitigate it. But the whole natural gas is a game changer, and it's part of the energy policy that we can't lose sight of the alternatives and renewables. But in the short term, it could change the economy. Because it's not just Marcellus, it's Utica, it's Vulcan, it's Eagleford. It's a source of energy that has great potential to change how we power America, but also transportation. And I'll tell you, when natural gas goes into a liquefied or compressed state and it becomes deliverable, and the facilities are now, my understanding, Travel America is just inked a deal to make facilities available for our long-haul tractor trailers, and they're doing that without subsidies on tax policy. That's a different conversation than even a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. But I think that you get into a transportation source of energy, that changes everything. Because then we're really, really taking a big step away from Middle Eastern crude oil that we're so dependent on right now. And that is a huge change.
There was an article in the paper that the railroad that runs through Allegheny County, the number of lines that are being shipped are a fraction because the coal plants are being shut down.
Yep.
Because they're fighting coal.
Yes.
And it's just such a big ripple effect.
Yeah.
The coal mines aren't being shut down though.
They're still mining and shipping it overseas.
Yes, at twice the price. I happened to talk to a guy that used to sell coal. He can't get it anymore because they don't want any domestic contracts.
Yeah. Well, and there's pressures on the mining operations that are because of the regulatory oversight and pushing it down.
But even if they get the coal-fired plants back online, they still might not be able to get contracts with coal mines because they're going to sell it for twice the price.
They're going to go elsewhere.
Same with the pipeline for oil from Canada.
Yeah.
They don't want to sell it to us. They want to ship it to China.
Okay, now this is my look at it. You got your gas here, well, I put it in the truck and shop it anywhere. You got your power grids all set up. Set your generator up on it. Run it. Create your electricity, pump it right back over the grid. Help us here in Allegheny County, where we have capped our landfill and we're starting to create a methane gas. Help us to capture that with a federal grant. Help us to capture that power and put that power to use right here. Okay, in that area, even if it's only enough to sustain the landfill's electricity. We hope that it's enough to sustain the county. And let's start with our schools, because our schools, and I mean, when I pay our school district for electric and gas plus transportation is a huge part of our school tax. It takes so much.
The county landfill doesn't put out enough gas to be useful. They can't even keep their flare going. But the Highland landfill on the other side of the hill is running generators on theirs every day. And they're running it into that new substation in Angelica. And that is doing what you're saying.
What we need to do in Allegheny County for our landfill to bring it to that standard where it's capturing the gas.
It wasn't started to do that. The Highland landfill was. So you have to change the whole thing.
That's what we design, okay? And
Right.
that's a good thing because I don't want, all of a sudden now all of us people who've been residents going to that landfill now have to pay Highland. And after my grandfather and my father, ask for sold land to the county for our landfill, let's please look into an educated proposal for our landfill.
That's where we got to think about it.
No, I'm not here. I'm classified as a radical, a veiled vigilante, and bounce off the Republican committee for my views. All right? And I do not, you're a great presence here, sir. Congressman